Hello, Anna. How are you?
I am well. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes, I can hear you perfectly fine. How are you
Good.
doing?
Fantastic. I don't know how it's December, but I felt like I was saying that when we last met about how is it almost like Thanksgiving and stuff. So it's crazy. The
Uh,
days just keep on going.
do you have a good break? How long was you off for?
So I think the students were off. Oh gosh, maybe they were done that Tuesday evening. And then our office, we went on holiday Wednesday at noon. So it was pretty good. But unfortunately, we don't get the same days off during winter semester. So yeah, so we will be fully operational, from mid-December all the way through the beginning of the new school year. So
Really?
yeah, there are some universities that, like, from an administrative level, they'll close for a week and a half, 2 weeks, but Duke does not do that. So we will
Oh,
all be working. Yep.
so only for like Christmas and like New Year's Day, like those days you're off?
Exactly right. Exactly right. Kind of your typical bank or federal holidays. Yep.
Huh. Do the students leave though during like
Yes,
remember?
yeah.
Okay.
Students get a long time. So depending on your final exam schedule, I mean, you could be done with exams a week from today. And then they don't report back until January 11th, I believe. So almost a month.
Wow. But for the staff, that's
For the
that is
staff, though, I mean, there's not, it depends on the school. There's a couple programs at Duke that do have students matriculate in January.
Mhm.
So they're asking some of those, oh, classes start in a couple weeks. I want to make sure I'm all good. But for the majority of students, they've already registered with classes. They already know what they owe. So it does tend to be slower, but we can't just like close our laptops and chill for 2 weeks.
So is there like a busy period for you where it's like just a couple weeks that are like just go, 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 and then a couple weeks like the rest of the year where it's kind of calm?
Yeah, so I would definitely say probably middle and end of July gets a little crazy.
Oh, really? Like
I
just right
think
in the middle of summer?
yes. So that is because you have all of the incoming students,
Uh-huh.
and typically bills go out sometime early June with an August 1st due date. So as the billing due date gets closer, there's a lot more questions that come about.
Oh, so like all of like the billing, like the students for the actual like tuition at Duke is all you?
So, not necessarily, but so many folks use loans to pay for their
Oh,
bill. So they have questions. And, at Duke, there's so many different offices that have a touch point in how you pay for school.
uh-huh.
So sometimes students find our office and maybe we can answer one of four of their questions. And then we need to send them to the other office that has a hand on the finance side of paying for school. So it really just depends on the individual, on their financing needs and what their questions are. But summer, definitely as people get closer to the due date, there's a lot of questions that come about. So yeah, July gets a little busy for us.
Huh. Oh, I see. So like, but it's like a lot of different offices though. So it's not like all the people that come to you. That at least that's like good, right?
Right. Yep. And there are some questions where we are able to funnel right back out. Like, oh nope, that is truly a bursar question or a billing question, not us. So some of those we can redirect, which is nice. But then our other busy time of the year will be coming up this next semester, typically March through April, very beginning of May is when we do all of our federal loan exit counseling. So for all of the students who are graduating with federal loans, they are required to go through essentially a seminar that covers the basics of the repayment process. Yeah.
Oh, so it like guides them towards like what are the next steps, like post college, like what are you, how are
Yep.
you going to repay this? What schedule are you going to do it all on, and that sort of
Yes,
stuff.
exactly. And we do have quite a few, especially our grad students who did not borrow loans in undergrad. So it is a brand new experience, can be really overwhelming. So we offer group presentations, and we typically do it by cohort. So if you're from the business school, we'll offer a session for all graduates in the business school. We'll offer that for the undergrads and for the law school and the Nicholas School, our environmental policy school. So that keeps us pretty busy, just because that does get to be hundreds and hundreds of students. But it's really impactful, because again, there's lots of folks who are overwhelmed. And I think the way that our office breaks down the repayment process, it seems much more manageable versus you're just looking at this number and thinking, oh my gosh, where do I start? So.
Wow. Okay. Huh. That's actually very interesting. So but all of the students need to go through this as long as they have like $1 from like a federal loan, right? Because they all need to
Yeah, everybody. Now, how the federal government actually enforces that is probably not crazy. But you are supposed to go through exit counseling, and you don't have to do the one that our office puts on. You can go right through Department of Education and do one, but technically speaking, it is written in their law of being a borrower that you do have to go through exit counseling.
Oh, I see. Huh, interesting. But I'm assuming a lot, if not most of the people take at least some sort of federal loan by their time at Duke. So that's like a lot of people, like a lot of students, right?
Especially the grad students. Undergrads, it really depends, because you do have some students who are still being heavily supported by family. But as you get to the grad student level, it's primarily students are paying through student loans.
Oh, huh. Okay. Interesting. Wow. Never knew that. So it's a very lot of moving parts, right?
There is, and that's the hardest part when you are acclimating to your university, is figuring out who do I go for what question. And sometimes we have folks who had a really good experience with our office, and they'll just want to call us for everything, because you don't always get that same customer service from every single person you encounter. That's just real life, right? That happens. So that's another thing too, is it's just somebody has a good experience and they want you to help them with everything, and it's like, oh, this is my one role, and there's 10 different folks that you'll have to speak to for your whole college experience, and that's a small number, but there are tons and tons of offices to know and to acclimate yourself with.
Wow. Because it's like, even with remote, something like housing or whatever, there's like a bunch of like different offices that help you with housing, a bunch of different offices for student life, and a bunch of offices for finance. Okay. Huh. Yeah. Interesting. Wow. Okay, well, give me 1 second. Let me just send out a couple last minute reminders. So what we decided on doing is, because for our registration, we had people RSVP, and we had a little bit more than we anticipated. So instead of bunching together, because we did one before with somebody else, who was like too many people came into the Zoom, and then it was like the thing crashed. So what I'm doing this time is, instead of sending out the Zoom link, I'm sending out like a YouTube link. So it's like live streamed on YouTube, so people can watch it live, but it's like not like everybody crammed into our meeting space. So I still will monitor the live chat in terms of questions that people are going to raise the questions. But in terms of because we had them submit some questions beforehand, so I have a lot. I even had people register and submit the questions after I sent them to you. So we'll see if we have time for that. We'll see if we have time for that. But well, that will come down. But I think, give me 1 second. Let me just send out, because I send out the YouTube link to everybody beforehand, and then we will get started at around 6:30. Okay. And then because another thing was I don't want this to be just a one-time thing. You're here. We very much value your time. So if we can keep this as something that people can refer back to in the future, I think that's also something that can be a great resource for other people, if you don't mind, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Because a lot of people, they end up emailing us and say, hey, do you have any videos on, college finances and things like that? That's obviously not what we do. There are workshop series, but they're not what we do. But I'd like to just say, hey, we have this wonderful video with Anna from Duke, and she would be more than happy to, show you the insides and outsides of that process. So yeah. So give me 1 second. Let me send out a couple things, and then is everything good on your end in terms of tech and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And unfortunately, so I had a co-host with me today. We were all set to come, but then this morning she got a positive COVID test.
Oh
So
no.
yeah, and then she has like a fever and bad cough right now. So it's like, no, no, you rest, you rest. And then so it's gonna be me and you today, which is
Yeah.
gonna be very gonna be
Isn't
very
that funny?
exciting.
Well, obviously Grant was supposed to be my other half, and obviously his schedule didn't work out. So we're just rolling with it.
That's what you get with COVID these days.
Yeah.
I'll give you that much. Yeah. Alrighty.
I'm just making some notes on some of the questions,
Okay.
just in case I need something to refer back to.
And because like in the beginning, I'm just because I think I had a call with Horace sometime recently and told me when he did it with you back in the day. Like there was like a portion in the beginning where we just basically talked about what we like flip R and we introduce
Mhm.
ourselves. So that'll be like a good breathing room for you to just kind of then just kind of
Just
just
sit with my
wait.
thoughts.
Yes, 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 yes. And then I'll try to get through as fast as I can be because then we can get to your actual information that you have. But it's just a lot of like, oh, what is Flip? Because we also have to advertise ourselves
Mhm.
because we
Mhm.
we need team members. But actually, what's so funny is we have a bunch of new people join our team, but they're all from like West Coast, Australia, like India. And like right now in India, it's like 2 a.m. And like in Australia, it's like 9 a.m. So that's what comes with a very diverse group of but yeah. Well, we're chilling on the East Coast, so it's all good, because that's why I was originally going to do 3:30, but then people on the West Coast were like, hey, that's gonna be too early for me. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, fine, fine. Just give me 1 second, just send this out and we'll Alrighty, I think everything in terms of announcements should have been sent out. We are going to get started. Let me pull up my handy dandy little presentation and we will get started. All right, give me 1 second. Alrighty. All right, Anna, you can see my screen, right? You just want to make
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. All right, let me just make sure the live stream can see my screen as well, and then we will get started. We'll get started. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. I think our slideshow is live on Zoom, so on Zoom and YouTube, so we are all good to go. So let me go ahead and get us started. Anna, if you're good.
Yep.
All righty. So welcome everybody to our college finances workshop, the first of 2023 school year, hosted and brought to you by Flip. And so we are very, very fortunate to have Anna here, who is an assistant director at Duke University's Educational Programming Office. And so we are very fortunate to have her here as our guest speaker. And we'll dive into our Q&A with her in a little bit. But first, I do want to just begin by introducing to you all what FLIP is, what the Youth Economics Initiative is, and how our workshop is going to pan out today. So in terms of specifics, we're going to talk a little bit about what is financial literacy and why financial literacy is important in today's world, as well as applying how we can see financial literacy in college, in life, and beyond, because that's something that we really want to look forward to, not just college, but how will we, use our financial literacy skills that we've developed over the past years to help us to go further in life. We'll also touch a little bit upon FAFSA, which is the federal application for free student aid. And then finally, we will talk about how you can get involved in financial literacy in terms of whether or not it's joining the YEI, joining FLIP, or just basically involving yourself in finances overall. So that's something we're also going to cover. And then finally, which I know you all are very much excitedly waiting for, is with our guest speaker. So we will have Ms. Anna talk a little bit later about some of the questions that you all submitted beforehand. So I have compiled all of them together, and we're going to ask those to her and see her insights on those. All right, so let me go ahead and jump into what is financial literacy. So financial literacy is really just, can you understand and can you implement different financial skills? So we're talking about credit cards, we're talking about loans, we're talking about banking, we're talking about all different sorts of things that really are just the finances of our everyday lives. Can you understand them? Can you apply them to your daily life? Can you see them in action in what you do and how you do them every day? And so that's really the encompassing overarching idea of financial literacy that we're, through the YEI and through FLIP, we're trying to get across and share with as many people as possible. So right now, and I think the problem is very evident, is 66%, and I believe this statistic is very, very much recent. So 66% of Americans lack financial literacy. So without these skills and the mindset and the knowledge to be able to put forth to how we spend our money, how we save our money, how we budget our money, how we invest our money in our everyday lives, it really often becomes not so much a hindrance, but more of a setback into what you can do and how you can achieve your financial goals. And so, believe it or not, 3.5 billion people are financially illiterate across the world. And so that's something that really, taking in today's modern society and what we have, the resources we have, the people we have, the knowledge we have, really goes to show how much more we need to do in order to advance financial literacy and see our knowledge and our skills in action. So it does often cause high levels of stress among people, especially, for example, if you're looking to buy your first house or looking for us to take out your first loan to buy your first new car, or maybe you're saving up for college, which is why we have Miss Anna here. Or, maybe just making bad investment decisions, how you can make saving decisions. And what if you have an issue with your credit card? Because that's something I know most of us, if not all of us, already had the opportunity of getting exposed to. So really, it's just our goal here, not just at Flip, but at the YEI, the Youth Economics Initiative as a whole, is just to bring everybody closer to understanding the nuances, the intricate details behind how you can use your financial literacy to push yourself forward and to take that next step in terms of your future financial goals, whether that's saving, investing, buying a new house, buying a new car, or funding college. So, and people often ask, why is financial literacy important? Well, financial literacy is, and like I mentioned before, it's very much a necessary skill people use throughout their lives. And we're able to see this in a lot of school districts around the US, is so many different school boards are pushing forward for mandatory financial literacy classes. Because sure, we have economics, and that's one of the backbones of our Youth Economics Initiative. But what's more important for us is being able to understand how can financial literacy apply to our everyday lives. And so we want to try to embed and incorporate and share this knowledge with the rest of the community so they can use this type of information, this type of skills to better what they do in the future. And so what's so important and why we created the Youth Economics Initiative here in the first place was so that we can help you all develop it at a younger age. Because just like learning a language, the earlier you know it, the better it's going to stick with you and the better you're going to be able to apply it in the future. So what we really, really want to try to do, not just with our workshop today, but in our events at Flip, as well as our Youth Economics Initiative events moving forward, is we want to really try to instill, not just throughout our clubs, but throughout our individual communities and our individual members. Every one of our 4,100 members right now around the world, we want to help you develop financial literacy at a young age. And that is especially important to what we do at Flip. And that is especially something that Ms. Anna here can help us and bring us towards, especially since taking the first step through college. So this gets to the elephant in the room. What is Flip? Why am I here? And why do we have a workshop? So FLIP stands for the Financial Literacy Introduction Program. We are the service arm of the Youth Economics Initiative, which is the world's largest coalition of economics club. And what we do in FLIP is we have a team of partnership managers. And what we do is we curate a curriculum in partnership with Bank of America, Better Money Habits, as well as our partners at Start Now Press, which is a nonprofit developed out of Stanford University. We really, through our collection and through our partnerships with these organizations, what we want to try to do is push forward with as much curriculum, with as much knowledge as we can develop. With that curriculum, we've been able to develop actually 16 modules already. We're moving on to the 17th one as we speak. We have a team of very much dedicated managers working on it right now, and they're working towards it as best as possible, as fast as possible, as most efficient as possible. But we're just trying to get out the curriculum and embed it into our communities, like I mentioned before. And so we have a network of so many, I think right now it's 87 clubs across 31 regions with over 4,100 members across the world that are within the Youth Economics Initiative. And what FLIPS wants to do is we want to try to take advantage of that network. We want to try to take advantage of the spread we have and to put our financial literacy curriculum, our information into the hands of more individual community members. And so really our target audience is 7th to 12th graders, but we welcome students of all ages, whether you're in college right now watching this live here with us, or you're in 7th grade or 6th grade or 5th grade or 4th grade or 3rd grade watching this right now. We want to let you know that, there is never a minimum or a maximum, in fact, age to start learning about financial literacy. And that is part of the reason, if not the entire reason, why myself and Ms. Anna are here today. So a little bit more is what we do is we have this network of different clubs that we work with. We shoot them out our curriculum. We give them updates. We send them emails. We help them incorporate them into our volunteer activities. We've done partnerships with the California Council on Economic Education. We've done partnerships with like San Jose and Milpitas public libraries. We've done so many different partnerships with so many different organizations in so many different parts of the United States that what we want to try to do is you all, the people who are watching our workshop today, every single one of you are partners. We want to try to leverage you all to help us bring our financial literacy curriculum that we've worked so hard to develop and push it into our local communities. And a part of how we do that is we partner with local organizations. So like I mentioned, we will disperse our volunteers into these local organizations to try to empower them to empower others. So a lot of our curriculum is very tailored towards the basics that you would think of when you come to financial literacy. We're talking budgeting, we're talking insurance, we're talking loans, we're talking credit, we're talking savings, we're talking taxes, retirement, identity theft, on and on and on. Those are the things that you will be able to apply to your everyday lives. And those are the things that you will be able to incorporate into what you do, how you do it, and what you do moving forward. So that is something that we focus on here at Flip, and we're just trying to, like I said, bring it out to as many people as possible. So how you can get involved is actually very simple. The first thing I would say, and sure Xana would agree, it's just educate other people. See what you can do in terms of spreading the knowledge you have, the information you know, or any sort of facts or statistics that you think might important into your financial goals later on. And being able to use that information, use that knowledge to educate others and bring that information to share, that's what we think is the best way to move forward. Because even if you know it, if somebody else knows it, that makes their lives much easier in a financial aspect. Advocacy is also pretty important. We've seen, financial literacy come up so often, like I mentioned earlier, in school board meetings, right? And we're seeing more in city council meetings and op-eds and newspaper editorials and things like that, where we see a presence of a push for more financial literacy. And as we're moving into the modern age of society, we really want to get it out to as many people as fast as we can, because the younger, the better. And finally, and last but not least, and perhaps I'm biased, but most important to me, is volunteer with us. I'll go on later in the next slide, but we have so many places where you all watching the workshop today can help us. You all can help us do outreach. You all can help us, like I said, curate a curriculum. You all can help us to move, or even like me, hosting a workshop here with, the assistant director of educational programming at Duke. So there are so many ways by joining Flip, by joining the Youth Economics Initiative, that you can help out and take a bigger step towards not only learning more, because you actually learn a lot. When you join us, you learn a lot about financial literacy just because of the curriculum you interact with, but in sharing that information, it really goes a long way. So in terms of volunteer opportunities, what we do is very simple. If you're a club looking to partner with us, all you have to do is attend a Flip training session, which either myself or one of my colleagues in the Flip team will help host. And then you can volunteer for Flip, and you can earn Presidential's Volunteer Service Award certified volunteer hours, like we see, like a handy dandy volunteer opportunity right there below. And then you can give back to your community, right? You can deliver the workshop to your neighborhood through an HOA meeting, or you can develop it. You can deliver it in a club, or you can deliver it in a school, or you can deliver it in a synagogue, a church, a temple. Where you get access to your local community, that is a perfect place for our curriculum to go. We have the materials, we're just looking for people to help us bring it out. So in terms of applications for college and how we see it projected in Life and Beyond, there's really 5 pillars that I'm sure Anna's going to touch upon later today. But in terms of, like credit score and budgeting and savings accounts, those are the things that you're going to encounter right away, right? As soon as you head into college, maybe you're looking for your first credit card. Credit score comes into mind. Maybe you're looking towards buying, say, a new MacBook. Then budgeting comes to mind. Say you want to invest for a house that you want to buy as soon as you get off college. Savings comes to mind. But then as you move along, and this is something I'm sure Anna will have a very fun time talking about, is managing debt, which for a lot of us going to college will become. So that, as well as retirement, which we're looking into the long distance future, is how you can be sustainable, not just now, not just tomorrow, but years and years into the future. So in terms of scholarships, I'm going to touch upon this very quickly, but there are so many different scholarships open to students, to college students, to graduate students. For example, for merit-based, there's the Coca-Cola Scholars Program, there's the Burger King Scholars Program, there's the Davidson Fellows, there's Taco Bell, and there's Doodle for Google. Some of them are more specialized towards computer science or community service or leadership, but others like Coca-Cola are more well-rounded that encompass who you are as a person, that encompass what you do for your community, what you do in school, how you do in school, what leadership do you take on in school. So that's something merit-based that they do take into account. Need-based, there's the GATE scholarships and the state scholarship that really assess how much need do you need and how can they help you, get towards pursuing college, getting that higher education that can move you just one more step forward. FAFSA is named all too often in the application process. And I think for our fellow seniors out there, that's something that has been coming to mind a lot recently. So FAFSA determines your financial aid and what you get from the government and most colleges. So what you normally need is you need your social security number, you need your family size, income, all that personal information that your parents will find on their tax returns. You need all that details, all of those income and things like that. And you also need how many colleges and what colleges you're applying to. And really submitting that FAFSA is like a first step towards paying for college. Because a lot of us, when we need loans and we can't pay up front, those loans are going to be from the federal government and how we can get one step towards going and paying towards that higher education. Because a lot of us, we might not have access to private loans or family contributions. So FAFSA really comes into play here because they are an assistance program from the government that can help you and try to just temporarily hold you over, and you can slowly pay them back in the future. Finally, the moment we have all been waiting for. So we have here today Ms. Anna, who is, like I said, the Assistant Director of Educational Programming at Duke University. And so she is going to be our guest speaker for today. And she's going to be basically tailoring our Q&A sessions to answering your questions and getting you all the information that you all are looking for, not just looking into college process, but maybe you're in the middle of college process or you're looking past your college process. She has very much extensive experience, in her time working at Duke, watching students not just come into Duke, but leave Duke. And during their time at Duke, she has been a big player in all of that. So she has so much experience, so much knowledge, and so much just personal experience to share with us today. And so we are very much excited to have her with us. And yeah, so Anna, thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, and thank you, Raymond, for that introduction. I'll go ahead and just start off by kind of expanding on what you shared about me. So yes, my name is Anna. I currently work at Duke University within the Office of Student Loans and Personal Finance. From a back-end side of things where very few students interact with us, we're just working in our internal processes. Our office maintains all of that back end aspect of loan disbursement. So for folks who are thinking that they will be using federal student loans, if you came to Duke and you were using a federal student loan, our office would maintain the processes that would actually allow that loan to get to Duke and get applied to your student account. But from our student facing side of things, that's where I really come into play. And I oversee our educational programming around understanding loans and navigating personal finances as a college student. So I'm really here just to speak to some of those questions you may have, again, as you are maybe winding down your top choices for school. What are things to think about as you are looking at scholarship offers and why you may want to choose one school over another? For folks who are juniors, sophomores, freshmen, maybe even middle schoolers thinking about college, I'll also speak to some things you may want to consider just as you're getting ready to start that college search more formally. And then certainly things that I hope you keep away in the back of your mind once you are a college student, good things that I think if you can remember these, if you can implement these in some of your own personal finance practices, you are probably going to be a lot better off. I wish that I could have heard me talk when I was 18. I would have done a lot of things different, but yeah, again, I just want to be a helpful resource and kind of share insight into a world that, again, you don't know what you don't know. And so I just want to share that education, that knowledge, like Raymond said. It's great when you know it, but if you can help somebody else know it too, you really are making a big difference in your community. Oh, I may have lost your audio, Raymond.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Sorry. I think I forgot to unmute. But so yeah, so thank you very much for your very informative and very helpful introduction. And I guess you alluded to this just now when you were talking a little bit about yourself. But my first question is, and I think this came from someone. So why is financial literacy important? And how do you think understanding that financial literacy aspect can better help you as you enter into college or higher education?
Yeah, so I really think the big thing is, knowledge is power, and having that information as soon as possible really does allow you to take advantage of so many different opportunities sooner. So for example, I'll have students come to my office and they have heard from friends and seen on TikTok that they should be investing. And so that's something they're really, really curious about. And as we start talking, and it's over the course of 5, 10, 15 minutes, I start to ask them, well, what about just your foundational savings? What do you have put away for emergencies? Or what do you have put away for relocation? Because you're not going to be a student forever. And especially as a senior, the clock is ticking down. And so oftentimes students will say, well, I have some in savings, but I guess if I'm really thinking about all the things I need to be saving for, I'm actually not ready to invest. And so that's where that financial literacy piece, I think, really can give you the upper hand, is if you know the things that you quote unquote should be doing, and you actually enact some of those, or you start to make choices that get you that much closer to be able to start saving. Again, when those other doors open, oh, I had a fantastic opportunity for grad school and my student loan number is manageable. So I feel confident that I can go on to grad school and borrow some more and not be, facing issues with debt management. Or, hey, I've been saving since I was in high school. And now that I'm working while in school or had a paid internship, I've saved enough and then some. So I know I'm at an opportunity where I could go take a risk. I could go try to have my money work for me now because I've laid the foundation. And again, you can't run until you walk. It's the same thing with your finances. There are certain things that you just have to get through first. And you may not be able to take advantage of these other opportunities, go through these other open doors simply because you're still laying your personal finance foundation.
Very interesting. And I'd love to meet that person who came in talking about TikTok about finance investing. But very interesting insights and stories. I'm sure that you encounter on an everyday basis. But so talking about these while you're emerging into the college process, while you're coming into higher education, when you're coming into getting that bachelor's or getting that master's, in that growth phase, what do you think are some good resources to learn about financial literacy per se? Obviously, with our wonderful Flip workshops, that is number one. But besides that, what do you think are some other good resources that they can, learn about financial literacy, specifically maybe, for example, college-related financial literacy or other topics in that respect?
Yeah, so I would say one of the best resources you'll have are actually personal finance and financial literacy websites maintained by colleges and universities. So for example, our program, Personal Finance at Duke, as part of our larger office, Student Loans and Personal Finance, we have a website. Yale has a really fantastic financial literacy website. Indiana University has a fantastic financial literacy website. In fact, they are one of the oldest, most developed personal finance programs within higher education. So there are, I would say, as you are looking at your dream schools or schools that have fantastic programs that you're interested in studying in, start to browse and see if they have a personal finance or financial wellness or financial literacy website. A lot of the university maintained sites have resources designed for folks 18 to 24, kind of our traditional college age. Outside of that, Coursera, if folks are familiar with that platform, there are even free options that tend to be pretty good personal finance resources. Again, quite a few of them are done by universities. LinkedIn, if you have a premium account or maybe have a family member who has a premium account, LinkedIn Learning actually has some fantastic personal finance series as well. Better Money Habits through Bank of America, which is a partner through Flip, is actually also really well done. And a lot of these sites have a mixture of text that you read, short videos, questionnaires, and assessments. So you really do get kind of a wide variety. I would say the other probably common personal finance site that folks will encounter are things like NerdWallet or Wallet Hub. Just be mindful with some of those almost like blog type sites. A lot of times products that they feature or other investment firms, savings accounts, there are paid advertisements with those. Still really good information, but again, just take kind of that critical eye when you are looking at sites that may be receiving some type of payment for featuring the folks on their sites that they do.
Huh, interesting. So yeah, so that is definitely something that, because I know I've definitely come across a couple of nerd wallets here or there. But that's definitely something that to keep in mind for all of us who are just scouring the internet. University is a great source. So I guess elaborating a little bit upon moving into college, and in interacting and meeting with the students that you do on an everyday basis. What do you think are some of the most common financial challenges for these college students? And for these financial challenges, how do you see them, or how do you hope for incoming students to overcome them while they are in college?
So being a student, you have very limited income in a lot of instances, but that doesn't mean that your financial obligations or priorities necessarily match the income that you receive, right? Especially for folks who are actively supporting their households. They are planning to send money back home to siblings and to parents. There are students with dependents. There are students with pets, right? There are students who just want to find that balance between, again, doing the things I should be doing with my money and going and enjoying a dinner out with friends, because college is a very social time. So there are just so many instances where I think the pressure to spend money that you don't have is there. And I think one of the best things you can do is really just reflect inwards on the things that are most important for you. Recognize that you may have friends who can say yes to everything. And if you can't, own that. And that's really difficult, especially if you are that person in your friend group who, oh, I actually have to stick to a budget. That can happen. But again, you've got to think about what your financial reality is, the things that you value most, and really trying to connect how you spend to the things that are most important to you. And I think sometimes too, as students, especially if you're on full scholarships and maybe you're working while in school too, it could be the reverse. You may find yourself with a lot more free-flowing income than you're used to having. And you also don't have necessarily folks who are telling you what you should be doing with your money. So sometimes that temptation to just spend and go have fun and have a treat yourself kind of moment on a regular basis. I definitely have encountered that personally. Before I had a lot of the financial obligations that I do now while being a professional and in the workforce. And boy, I wish I would have gone back and said, yeah, that sale that you saw on Facebook or that dinner out with friends, you probably didn't need to say yes to everything. And again, that's where I wish I would have just saved more and spent less. So that honestly, that rule in and of itself, if you can save as much as possible and build that foundation, again, you are going to put yourself at such a more stabilized and confident place as you are navigating all these other choices post-bachelor's. So that's definitely something I would recommend. That sounds a little too simple, but again, just save as much as you can, cut spending where you can. That is going to be the secret to success, in all honesty.
it's the little things that make a big difference, right? At the end of the day. So
It really can. And not to be punitive about, oh, I wanted to go to Starbucks. Oh, I wanted to go get half off apps with friends, because sometimes that is your little lifeline when you are stressed and on the go. But again, when we're not conscious with what we're spending on, especially in this day and age with the push for consumerism so high, social media use being at an all-time high, and the amount of advertisements that get pushed through those platforms, and then just how interconnected all of our finances are. Very few people are using physical cash, so it is harder to track how many times we've said yes. So, again, just having that intentionality and that consciousness back into your spending decisions, like you said, those little things really can add up, and you'd be surprised in a lot of instances where you actually had room to make choice with your finances, but we sort of just said yes and then kind of had that, oh, hindsight's 2020, maybe I should have done something different.
oh, too bad I can relate too much. But oh dear. Anyway, so in terms of in terms of when they come into college and they're faced, and I know you and I were talking about this shortly before our workshop today. They come in August or July, depending on the university, and they see this very big and this very long and this very large bill right in front of them. So what do you recommend, and how do you recommend incoming college students when they see that, whether or not they have, merit-based scholarships or financial aid that are offered by the school? How do you recommend the ordinary college student that you've encountered in your everyday life on a Duke campus? How do you recommend they should plan to get ready for the student loans or get ready for debt?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say if the first time you've thought about it is when you first receive your university bill, you are thinking about it too late. There is definitely, as an undergrad student in particular, there is a very fine line between education empowering you because of the extra knowledge that you get, the degree that in so many employment fields you absolutely have to even be considered a candidate. But then there's also that point where we reach education becomes a hindrance because of the student loan debt burden that folks took on to go to a certain school. And being from a school like Duke, it's a private institution. It is, world renowned and provide students fantastic opportunities, but it does come at a pretty big price. And there are lots of schools with a similar kind of name brand effect, if you will, that folks sometimes are so focused on that name brand, I want to get in this type of school, that they are willing to do anything, or they feel like they're willing to do anything to just make it happen. And there are certain fields where, maybe as an undergrad, you're okay taking on a larger student loan balance because your field has a starting salary of $90,000 and you are willing to make some life concessions if you're taking on a big student loan burden because you wanted to go to your dream school. But again, at 17 and 18, making those decisions for your future 22, 23, 24-year-old self, you may be taking choice away in the future because you've decided, well, I'm going to go to this school, even if I have to borrow $200,000 in loans. And unfortunately, at the undergrad level, the Department of Education does not let you borrow that much money as a student. As a first-year dependent undergraduate student, you are only allowed to borrow $5,500 through the Department of Education. So if you want to take on a student loan to pay the rest, you're looking at a private student loan. And for my example, that was a private student loan of $194,500 over the course of your time in school. And again, it's really hard to know at 17 or at 18, or sometimes even at the graduate level, if your salary at the end of the day will make sense for what you've borrowed. So what I would really encourage folks to do is to look long-term at the costs of your school. Universities have to publish what's called the official cost of attendance, where they take almost any possible cost that you could have and give you this total. That total tends to change by about 3 or 5% each year. it tends to increase. So you can give yourself a ballpark figure of what it would cost to go to that school for 4 years. And a lot of universities do have different financial aid calculators where you can give rough estimates on your family's household finances, and you can get a sense of what financial aid you might receive. What grants might I get from Department of Education? Is there a scholarship from the university I'd be eligible for? And you can start to see, well, I'm only getting 40% financial aid from my institution, and the other 60% has to come from me and my family. And you can take that 60% estimate and probably carry it forward for the next 4 years and figure out if that's something that makes sense, especially within the context of what you feel like you want to study academically and do professionally. ROI, that return on investment, is not just for the world of investing. It is absolutely going to come into play when it comes to debt management. So that is something I would say really think critically on and give yourself a lot of time to understand the bill and understand the college costs. If you're not sure, reach out to a university's financial aid office. You could even contact me. I'd be happy to look into another school and kind of break down the costs with you if I can. But that is probably the number one piece of advice I'd have, is think critically and give yourself lots of time to reflect on those numbers.
Wow, $194,000. Wow. Okay, well, you all saw it here. This is case in point. But
Yeah.
so yeah, that is a lot.
They're real numbers too. It's not a number that I just picked out of thin air. These are numbers that, depending on the university, if cost of attendance is $80,000 a year, that's a reasonable number to estimate. Now, again, some folks are at a place where they have support from family, or family is willing to take out those loans on their behalf, but not every person is in that situation. So again, even if you are in that situation, that's where you ask yourself, does it make sense for me and for what I want to do long term? And do I want to make a choice that's going to maybe set the rest of the choices I'm able to make long term? Or do I want to give myself some financial flexibility and freedom as I enter the workforce and as I'm navigating 20s and 30s?
I see. And no, I know you mentioned this earlier, and I think this question came in, I think it was a private anonymous question, so I don't know who asked it. But this came in over the live stream. But in terms of, and I know you mentioned like the net price calculator and how we can use that to, along, you said, with the official cost of attendance that every university has to publish. So working alongside those estimates, I guess you could say, if a student were to see, and hey, when they input their financial information into that nice net price calculator, and it shows that there's no potential aid, financial aid, merit-based, need-based, any sort of scholarship that they could potentially receive from the given university, would you say from a financial standpoint for them to, when they apply for financial aid in that case, or knowing that information before the fact, would you suggest another course of action?
Not being a financial aid professional myself, I would certainly say, filling out documents for financial aid does at least leave the door open, especially if things change for you financially, because that happens. Life is unexpected, and we work with families who, started out their experience at school not needing financial aid, not needing loans, and then something changes, and then now they're working with our office and they're working with the financial aid office to see what options there are. If you're worried that applying for financial aid would hurt your ability to get into a school, you should certainly contact the admissions office and clarify that, because most universities are supposed to be what's called need blind, that they're not supposed to accept based on who can pay the full price sticker and who needs financial aid. Keep in mind that even if you don't necessarily think you'll qualify for a lot of scholarships or grants, if you want to use a federal student loan, you absolutely have to fill out that FAFSA, that free application for federal student aid. Some universities also have scholarships and things you can apply to later on as a student. So for example, especially at a lot of public universities, state universities, they'll have scholarships for each individual major or department. So if you decide that you want to go into accounting, They may have, through the School of Business, through the business department, they may have scholarships just for accountants. But if you don't have a FAFSA on file, chances are you're not going to be able to apply, even though those are funds maintained by the school. So again, usually financial aid documents open up more doors than they close, is what I would say.
Okay. That is some very good and very interesting insight that I'm sure a lot of folks watching can take away from that. But jumping back into the life as a college student per se, how would you say, or how would you recommend budgeting for the various necessities? And I know you mentioned, maybe a dinner out with friends or perhaps a movie here or there, but like more towards the necessities that the regular college student you see around Duke might need. How do you recommend, budgeting and weaving and navigating those necessities that come along with the life of a college student?
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of that is going to depend what year you are on in school. Oftentimes, first year and second year students are living on campus, and they have to be on a meal plan. So you're getting your food from dining halls or different places around campus, and you are living in the dorms or a residence hall. Because of the structure of that housing and that allotted meal plan, you don't necessarily have rent, and you don't necessarily have a grocery bill. You may go out and supplement some food for yourself. For example, when I was in undergrad, you were lucky to see me before 10 a.m. So I was not going to the dining hall for breakfast. I decided to go to the grocery store down the road and buy myself, a bagel or yogurt or things that I could make in my room or grab on the go as I was walking to class. So necessities will probably start to look a little more akin to the real world junior and senior year, when a lot more folks transition off campus and may have an apartment and may not be using a meal plan at that point. So for my first year and second year students, at that point, especially as a first year student, a lot of folks we work with don't want to work that first semester because they want to transition and say, academically, I want to make sure that I've got the study skills down, the time management skills down. I want to connect with my community. I want to take that fall semester kind of slower. That's very, very common that we hear. So that first semester, I would definitely say before you get into school, make sure you've been working over the summer if you can, so that you do have a little bit of savings you can carry with you. And chances are most of your necessities are going to be small bills. So maybe you are paying for your phone bill. Maybe you are paying for gas in your car, which right now gas prices probably would not be very small, especially for our folks on the West Coast. But comparatively to something like rent, right? Your necessities are going to be smaller. That's where I would just say that spending can get out of control, because so much of what you have to think about is provided for you, or you've already paid for it with your financial aid up front. And that's where those little get-togethers with friends or the online shopping can start spiraling out of control, just because you might not have as many responsibilities in the moment. But junior and senior year, if you don't want to be on campus, very good chance that your finances are going to increase. So again, do what you can to make a plan for what to say yes for. Something that our office recommends is to try frequency budgeting, where you give yourself an allotted, number of events, activities, trips, rather than a hard and fast dollar amount. So for example, you could probably give yourself, I know that I could go out to eat with friends 3 times to stay within a $50 budget each month. But it tends to be easier to track the frequency of an event rather than keeping track of dollars that we've spent, especially when you think about beginning of the month and end of the month. Where was that $50 that I told myself I'd spend? Again, frequency, a little bit easier. Or if you give yourself that permission, I'm going to get Starbucks Tuesdays and Thursdays because I have an 8:30 a.m. and that is my reward for getting out of bed. Again, you may need some things to get yourself to that early morning class, and as first year students, it's highly probable because you get to register for courses last. But again, that's a tip I would suggest too, as you're trying to find that flow. Frequency budgeting rather than actual numerical dollar amount budgeting might be helpful, and just kind of giving yourself some guidelines to stay in for those first couple semesters.
Interesting. Frequency budgeting. I'm sure that's something I'm going to be looking into. And a lot of our folks watching now will be sure to look into that as well. And I think this is a great question to piggy off of that. And obviously this depends on different schools. But this one came in the private chat. But and I know you mentioned in terms of housing, in terms of like that's where the big costs come in as a third or fourth year student at your respective university. So obviously it depends, but would you say from a financially more conservative standpoint, with students, if they wanted to per se save money for their future career or potentially graduate school, would you recommend staying on campus or living off campus? Which normally, because I know normally some people say living on campus is cheaper, others say living off campus. What's your take?
Yeah, it is definitely dependent on the university. So I would say in an area that surrounds Duke, living off campus actually is quite expensive. And historically, Duke has only given that option to seniors. And by the time you think about, the costs for an apartment application and maybe a U-Haul to move your things in, right? Especially if you're living in something unfurnished, you might need to purchase your own furniture. It truly does depend on the school. I would say most folks can save money living off campus, especially if they are in more traditional college towns where rent's a little bit cheaper. So for example, where I went and did my master's, folks were paying $250, $400 a month in rent. Yeah. And decent sized rooms. It's not like they were, living in I feel like we always talk about like New York City, right? When we're thinking very small apartments for what you pay. Actually got a lot of bang for your buck in that area. But it certainly was not New York City. So that was the trade-off, right? But keep in mind when I say the necessities you have to think about junior and senior year, part of that too depends on your families. You still can use financial aid to support yourself off campus. But sometimes when families get to that point of junior and senior year, if folks start to live off campus, sometimes there's a little bit more responsibility given to the student to stay on top of bills and things of that nature. So if you are receiving part of your loan or part of your scholarship directly in your bank account, and you are supposed to use it to pay for rent and pay for your groceries, if you're not being careful and you're spending what you need for your living expenses, that's where there's just a lot more to keep track of. Not to say that you don't end up saving money in those years, but you can accidentally spend your rent check. That is a very real thing. So do the homework of the area that you're moving to. You could probably even get on something like an apartments.com, a Zillow, and start looking at, well, what are the prices? And that may even be a deciding factor in what school you go to, because truly the cost effective piece, my junior, my senior year, sometimes even my sophomore year, if I want to live off campus, you may be able to, again, have your loans take you a lot further, have your scholarship take you a lot further, because you're living in a place where you can pay $400 for rent rather than $1,000.
Interesting. So it doesn't just depend on like where you go to school or what school you go to, but like who you are as a person, whether or not you can control yourself to,
It
cut
can
back when
be,
you need to.
it can be part of it. It's a new habit you have to learn. Most folks going into undergrad have not had to pay a large bill like rent before. So you do have to have that responsibility, that accountability. You have to have a money management system in place, and you have to know what are the fixed expenses that I absolutely need to make sure I have money on hand for. That is not part of your budget where you're using this money to make choices of yes or no. That is already made for you. You've signed a lease and you are living there. You know that money is spoken for already. So especially when you're thinking budgeting, a lot of your fixed and reoccurring expenses, you can almost set those funds aside on a month-to-month basis, because you know those are spoken for. You don't have to add that added math and bring those numbers along. They've got a job, let that job go on the back burner. You need to focus on the money left over and make sure that between groceries, other financial obligations, and having fun with your money, that's where the balance is. And that's probably what most folks are going to be focusing on when they're budgeting while in school anyway, just because, again, your rent cost is fixed.
Huh. Interesting. Well, now I guess, and I know this is probably where you most understand the inner workings of the like the finances office and university, but through which avenues, and obviously this must depend from university to university, like you were talking about, like budgeting and making sure that you're not overspending, not having too much fun with your the money you have, especially if you're living off campus. Now, how do you think and how do you see universities supporting students? How do you think our undergraduate students can go ahead and seek out those opportunities where the colleges can help them to improve their financial literacy, help them improve while managing this whole budget bill that comes every July, and potentially some fun along the way, or some potential other like books and things like that. So how do you think, in terms of in a college environment, students can better get access to those resources and take advantage of the resources that are given to them to help them navigate, to improve their financial literacy with respect to the different shifting costs that are coming with it?
Mm-hmm. So getting ready for the pure educational costs. I know I'm going to have a bill coming up and I want to understand what the charges are and how my financial aid is working together to pay that. That's probably going to be directed of one of two offices. Your financial aid office, which generally are the folks that assess your family's household income or your income if you're an independent student, and they tell you this is what the university can support you with, or this is what the Department of Education can support you with. For questions about charges, most offices have what's either called a billing office or a bursar office. So those two offices in conjunction are probably going to be the first places you start with. As you're thinking about, okay, I know how I'm paying for university. I've thought about the long-term investment. I feel confident with my plan of paying for this for the next 4 or 5 years. And if I'm taking on student loans, which is very likely, I've already started thinking about that long-term management, which I'm sure we'll speak to in a couple more questions here. Once you are in your university, that's probably where you want to seek out something like my office, which would be a personal finance office. They have a lot of different names on college campuses. Many universities offer these types of programs, not every single one does. So if you don't have a financial wellness office or a personal finance office, you may have some folks in billing or in financial aid who are willing to speak to you about some of these budget and money management questions. It's not a guarantee because that's technically not part of their role. But if they're really passionate about personal finances and helping students, they'll probably make time for you. Otherwise, a lot of those resources that we spoke to, tap into another university. You may not be able to meet with a staff member, but look at some of the resources they have on their website. That's from a very practical financial literacy piece. The other thing I would say from just an applicable, you've already paid for it, and this is going to help your financial literacy long term. You have student fees that pay for the gym on campus, that pay for the rec center. You have fees that have paid for movie nights or free pottery nights. Go take advantage of a lot of those events on campus. If you get really well connected, not only can you start to drive some of those programs and make suggestions and get what you want happening in your dorm, but if you decide to take a leadership role, you can also be the one planning those events. And some of those positions on campuses come with a paycheck. So I would definitely say seek out the events and the things that are being provided for you on your university, because if you think about it, you've already paid for it. So you might as well, again, have your dollars actually go to use. Don't have that student service fee go to waste. Use it for every penny. And if there's something that is missing, go to the university and let them know, because oftentimes change comes from the student voices.
Interesting. And now, before we move on to the next question, I just want to, clarify for our folks at home. So their financial aid office of any respective university, their responsibility is just merely to offer you the information in how much or in what steps you need to take to secure that financial aid, whether it's need-based or it's merit-based from the school. And not a lot of schools may have the financial literacy office, which is the real helpful and the real assistance that students get in terms of navigating the information the financial aid office gives them. Is that the correct understanding of the differences between the two?
Yeah. And again, some universities, they have the capacity that their billing office and their financial aid office can speak to those broader personal finance concerns. But unfortunately, there are a lot of schools that are at capacity. And as much as they'd want to help you, may not have time in their day job to talk to you about personal finances. And if your questions start to go beyond, well, I understand what a loan is, but I want to talk about long-term debt management and, what are my repayment plan options, things like that. They may say, that's out of our professional scope, probably more so because of just human capacity and not a desire to not to help you. So yeah, some schools do have it all in one, and their personal finance folks are part of the financial aid office, but it just depends on the structure of each university and how big the offices are. And again, if this is something their campus felt was a need, and that if they have program to speak to it.
Interesting. So it must really vary between, maybe liberal arts colleges might have it all in one, other bigger schools, public universities might have different ones. So it's really just fluid, I guess you could say. But it was very interesting. You mentioned the students leading the programs, like the movie night out or like the pottery night. So, and this takes me to my next question, which is, in your experience meeting with students and watching students navigate this college and these finances that come along with it, a big aspect of it is making your own money and trying to pay for it yourself, not just with loans, not just with aid, not just with scholarships, but see what you can do. So obviously we know, like different like work study programs evident in some universities, and maybe you could speak a little bit about that, just like what it is and how it works. But what are some ways you've seen students manage their college tuition? How have they managed to, perhaps work or create saving techniques? I know you mentioned, cutting out on nights out or cutting out on that bowling adventure and just, maybe watching a movie at home. But how have you seen these students manage with college tuition, and how do you think that can help just bring down that interest that's going to occur over time on that loan?
Yeah. So establishing an income stream is probably one of the best things you can do for yourself while in school. Obviously, it helps you financially, but some of the things you do while in school, those are going to be the things you build your resume with. You're going to learn a lot of things in the classroom, but I think very few people point to the lecture that I had junior year, and this is what I did, this is the project I submitted, this is the GPA I got. Most folks are going to say, oh, I had this really great internship experience. Oh, I got an opportunity to research. But a lot of those things, folks want to see prior experience before they hire you. And I'm sure y'all have heard the conversation of, how do I get prior experience if this is my first job? So that's where, if you're sort of thinking, oh, the income stream, won't there be other times to make money? If you need something else to motivate you, think about the networking you can do and the professional resume you can start to build. What you did in high school is great, but folks don't want to talk about that. They want to know what you've done in this stage of your life. So that is one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard from somebody. But obviously, I'm a personal finance person, so the income portion is also very important to me. And so work study jobs tend to be on campus or at neighboring nonprofit agencies. And that fancy word work study, it is essentially speaking to funds that either the Department of Education, or in some cases, institution themselves, have put aside for employers to use to pay student wages. It is a way to incentivize creating student employment on campus, because if you think about it, if you are in office and you are looking for somebody to help file paperwork, you don't have to use your full operating budget to pay the student wages. You can tap into the work study program if that student receives a work study award. So don't get too caught up in the work study title. The nice benefit is for the employer, truly. Where it may impact you, it might make you a little bit more of a desirable candidate because you're more cost effective from the eyes of the employer. But if you don't have a work study award, that's okay. That doesn't mean that you can't apply for jobs on campus. Most folks appreciate the on-campus employment because of ease of access. You might have a place on campus that you work at that's right across from where you live. So you're waking up and you're just crossing the sidewalk and boom, you're at work. Also, most places on campus tend to be a lot more accommodating with your student schedule, where if you are working at a retail store or a restaurant in your town, they may not care that you're a student and they want you there when they want you there, regardless of if you have a big exam or if you were sick and got behind on assignments. So on-campus employment, I think, tends to be really a nice option. Keep in mind for folks who do want to get as much financial income as possible to pay for school and support yourself. When you are working on campus, you are typically limited to working 20 hours a week. That's generally the recommendation for students anyway, but we do have a lot of students who are full-time students and are working 30, 40, 50 hours. You just won't be able to do that through an on-campus position. You could work your 20 hours on campus, and then if you wanted to work a little more, it would have to be somewhere out in the community, not associated with your university at any at any cost. Where some of those can have a little bit of limitation, especially if you're working at an office, a lot of those hours are 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So, if you're a night owl or you want to work on the weekends, if you're working on campus, that might be a little more challenging. So that's where I've seen a lot of more of like the student side hustles come into play. I've had students dumpster dive, and I've had students go on Facebook Marketplace and flip furniture. Y'all will see, if you're not enrolled in a university already, come move out season, the amount of things that folks throw away that is in perfectly good condition is wild. I furnished my office at home with like half the things in it are things that were left at my apartment complex. And I was like, oh, this is perfectly good. Little disinfectant, little Clorox wipe, good to go. So I had a student do the same thing, but she sold pieces for a profit, and she just kept furniture in her apartment. And she, obviously she could do that particular gig as it worked with her schedule. I've had folks go into online tutoring and prepping with standardized tests for high school students wanting to go into college. I've seen folks do things like drop shipping and, buying things on clearance and selling them on Amazon, right? So I've seen a wide variety. And I think especially with how virtual work really expanded, there's a lot of creative options that folks can seek out. That's not a traditional office job, that's not working on campus, that's not working in food service or retail. So if that is not something that interests you, and you need something where you can make money, but you don't have a lot of time to do so, get creative with some more of these, again, non-traditional employment roles.
Wow. So people do dumpster diving for good, like good furniture and things like that. Obviously not dumpster diving, but maybe just searching around for big.
There's a little bit of dumpster diving that happens though, because truly, it is these industrial size pieces of equipment that are just overflowing, and it's perfectly good items. So as long as somebody hasn't thrown, their garbage of food and things like that on it, a lot of stuff that's just sitting there. So yeah, no shame in that. I've gotten a lot of really great free pieces just because somebody set it by the dumpster and I was like, oh, this is in perfectly good shape. Again, little disinfectant, we're good to go.
Wow. See, there you all have it. Another great way to earn money. Wow. So now talking about all the wonderful things students are doing, what have you seen from your experiences at Duke? Common mistakes people tend to make when it comes to trying to manage their finances and trying to get that extra dollar in or get that extra income stream in to help them pay for college. And how do you think these specific mistakes, and we talked about challenges before, but how do you think these mistakes can be corrected?
Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest mistakes I've seen is folks short-sighting themselves with savings. I mentioned this kind of at the beginning of our conversation, but it's very easy to get comfortable with a nominal amount in your savings. Call it $2,000, which is a fantastic amount to start with. And as a senior, getting ready to leave the student world and go join the professional workforce, when you think about the costs of moving to a new city, when you think about the fact that you may need to pay first month's rent, second month's rent before you've even gotten a paycheck, just telling yourself, well, $2,000 is enough. There are so many different life events that we need to be preparing for. So when I'm working with folks, I always encourage them to really articulate, what are you saving for and how much do you need to have saved for that particular event? So again, if I'm working with a senior, they might want to go on one last senior spring break with all of their friends. They might want to have a rainy day fund or an emergency fund because, again, life happens. And especially if you are somebody who's going to be more financially independent and you can't just call rich uncle to help you out, you are your own rich uncle. You need to make sure that you can pay for a last minute plane ticket in case family falls ill. If your laptop dies, are you able to replace it? And then again, my senior, you are getting ready to graduate. So what's relocation going to cost? So I'll have folks who very quickly go, oh, this 2,000 needs to be something more like 5,000. And this whole time I've been saying, oh, well, the $2,000 can cover spring break. Oh, the $2,000 can cover my emergencies. But again, we have all of these events that $2,000 probably can't go to all of them. So giving yourself savings buckets, giving yourself that final goal that each bucket needs to be at. This bucket needs to have 500. This bucket needs to have 1,500. And really breaking it down, that's going to give yourself truly that security. The other thing that I have seen happen is with debt management, whether that be with student loans or whether that be with credit cards. When you are in a cycle of poor debt management, and oftentimes it's just because you don't know that you're making a mistake or you're making a decision that's actually hurting you. With a lot of those instances, it can take years to rebound and replenish your credit. So for example, we have folks who borrow different types of loans. We've been under a federal student loan pause for the last over 2 years at this point, but we have some students who thought that a loan that they had was through Department of Education, and it wasn't. So they weren't paying on their loan because they thought it was part of these COVID-19 relief efforts. And they've been reported to the credit bureaus, and their score dropped 100 points because they forgot that one of their loans wasn't actually a federal student loan. That happens. I've had students get under significant credit card debt, and we're talking about payments with 20% interest. That's really difficult to get out from under, especially on a student income stream. So what I would say is a lot of these things are about proactive planning. And going into things with a game plan, especially when you're utilizing any kind of debt, whether that's student loans or whether you're looking to open a credit card for the first time. I recommend to folks with credit cards, for example, don't worry about the points. Don't worry about the cash back. This is a tool that you are using strictly to build your credit. That is its only role. Once you've built your credit, once you've established, hey, I'm at a 720, that's great. Then maybe we can start to look at adding one of those credit cards that is offering something else to you. But again, that's something where we really need to figure out what's the purpose of whatever I'm using within my personal finances, really focusing on that purpose, not shying away from that, and going in with a strategy. My credit card is only being used for groceries and only for the purpose of building credit. It's not being used in any other instance. I'm not saving it to my computer because it's not an opportunity to spend. It is just a tool that is going to leverage me into the credit system. That's it. So I think just going in with truly the purpose and intentionality of these financial decisions, I think is the biggest thing, because otherwise you're working multiple years to overcome a bad habit or a mistake. And again, when it comes to money and time, there are certain things where you just you are stuck with it because, oh, I missed a payment. It's on my credit for 7 years. Can't do anything about it.
Wow. Huh. Very, very insightful. So you've seen a lot of, college students, unfortunately, so they just apply for credit cards and they just start spending away.
Some do.
Wow.
Some have heard the importance of building credit, but again, didn't go into it with a game plan. Another thing that can happen for first-time credit users, ideally, you want to try to stay below 30% of your approved maximum line of credit. That is just kind of, it's a little arbitrary, but that's really just to signal, hey, we told you you could spend $1,000, but look, you're only spending 100. You're so responsible. That's great. You're less than that 30%. So that tends to boost your score, especially when you're a first-time user and your credit profile is very thin. So I work with students who are like, oh, I didn't realize that. I thought that because I got approved for $1,000, I could spend $500, $700. I mean, I pay it back. But there's some of these arbitrary rules behind a lot of financial systems that you do need to know those as well, so that you are, again, being as successful as possible. So credit is a big one that I think there's just a lot of unknown with using credit. And that is one I would say tends to just get folks, can get folks off to a rocky start financially, just because there's so many nuances with it.
So for folks out there, so even if we know that, hey, if I spend, say, $700, this month on my credit card bill, I can pay that off immediately, no issue. Even if that is the case, if I have $1,000 credit limit, then I should not go anywhere above 250 or 300, even if I have the option to pay it off.
For your first credit, yes, you really want to stay at that 30%. Now, if it's an emergency and it's your well-being at stake, we're not going to put our credit score above taking care of ourselves, getting our place, giving ourselves food to eat, roof over our head, taking care of a medical bill. Don't put your credit score above that. That is not holistically a financial well-being positive. Your credit score is not more important than you. But again, when you're just thinking normal everyday use, if you know that you have, a set plan for how you're using your credit card, and you are going to put $700 in a month on that card, make payments throughout, so that, yeah, you can still spend that $700, but at any given time, you're not above that 25-30% threshold.
Okay. Huh. Interesting. Okay. So that is definitely some good insight. Folks can take away from them. 30%. Never knew that before. Interesting. So, and now let's shift a little bit away from within the campus. And I know Duke in particular is very much renowned for its plethora of study abroad opportunities. And for those of us, for folks who are interested in studying abroad, and I know you talked about a lot of, for example, work study programs, or, even something as minute as, like dumpster diving, or, taking over like side hustles. When we go to like other countries, it changes significantly. So how do you think, in your perspective, students should change or modify, if at all, their saving and spending habits once they're abroad, say in Asia or in Europe? Or obviously it might depend on the destinations, but how do you think one semester abroad can really shake up things for our financial literacy in college?
So one thing you'll want to do, especially if you're going to be somebody who's on financial aid, you'll want to communicate with the financial aid office what kind of funding you'll get for study abroad. At Duke, if you are on financial aid, you'll get significant funding to be able to study abroad. So if you're somebody who's on the call who's thinking, I don't know if study abroad is something I'll be able to afford, your financial aid office may be able to support you more than you realize. The other thing that you can think about, especially if you have some flexibility on where your study abroad is, going somewhere where the US dollar carries a little bit higher, or your home currency carries a little bit higher, that also is kind of just, again, a way to get your dollars to stretch a little further. One of the biggest things I would say that folks don't necessarily account for is just when you're in this new environment that you're going to want to be a tourist along with being a student. And so there's a lot of that extra spending that can happen, whether you're sightseeing in the country you're studying in, whether you are going on excursions to neighboring regions, and if you're just wanting to immerse yourself fully in the culture. I did not do a traditional study abroad program. I did more of a research abroad where it was more of a 2-week trip. And one of the things that I wish I would have done is bought little things to prepare in microwaves or things like cold cuts and bread to make sandwiches. I felt like, oh, because I'm, not staying someplace long term, that, of course I have to go buy lunch and go buy dinner out and, breakfast if the hotel didn't have it. That got really expensive. Now, again, most folks studying abroad, a lot of times you're going to be at a university, you're going to probably have a meal plan and you're probably going to have housing. That's part of your study abroad costs up front. But again, it's going to be those extra things. So I would say once you realize study abroad is for you, again, saving is the name of the game. If you can start putting extra money away, do so. If you are going on a student visa somewhere, you're going to be extremely limited in work options. So if you were thinking, oh, when I'm studying abroad, I'm just going to go ahead and work, you may not be able to. You may be breaking the law if you try to earn money, even if it's under the table. So, and by under the table, if you're just trying to work for cash and have nobody know, if you get caught, there could be serious ramifications. So that's going to be something to keep in mind. You may not have your traditional income streams available to you. And so that means that, again, you're going to be relying on savings as your income. So you'll need to have a very robust savings before that experience.
Interesting. So let's say, for example, and I don't know if this is more common, but I've seen more and more students kind of push towards Europe and schools like the London School of Economics, Trinity College over there. So in Europe, if students aren't going per se on like a visa, if they're carrying a US passport and they have that ability to stay there for a long period of time, would you suggest them more, like you said, experience the place while they're at it for those, select few months, or would you recommend them, hey, keep it up, keep going on whatever, income stream you're, reliant on at school and keep at that in, wherever you are?
Again, it's really going to be dependent on the rules because now you're starting to get in like tax rules and visa rules. So I would just assume if you're going to be abroad that you're probably not working. If you are, it's probably going to be like a postgraduate type of thing. And, you don't have a student role involved whatsoever, because once you are a student, again, how you can work is very, very different. But in terms of, I would just say, make sure you are communicating with your school if you're studying abroad. Even if you're just traveling in the summer, you still may want to look at the rules of what you would have to do income wise working in a different country. What's your tax obligation in the US? Do you have a tax obligation in that visiting country? That starts to get outside of my professional scope, but I just know from what I have seen working with our international students that there are very strict rules with different visas and what you're allowed to do for work.
Interesting. But the takeaway from that for folks who are wondering and submitting that question is, you don't really have to work abroad and you could just experience it and just, you can just release yourself from those obligations for the tiny bit of time. But obviously, like you said, just be cognizant of what you do and whether you go out.
It's probably going to be something where knowing that you aren't able to work as much, that you're working even harder ahead of time so that you can have that the less focus on income stream because you have to. Now, keep in mind, again, if you are somebody who is looking to go to an institution all 4 years and you're looking to not just study abroad, but truly your full education is going to be abroad, generally there is some work that you have access to, but it has to be through the university. But if you're just sort of, well, I might go travel and learn off and on for a year, but you're not necessarily going on a student visa, or you are, again, that's where things get a little tricky. So if you have questions though, your visa office at the university you're looking to study at should be able to assist you.
So for our international applicants coming from across the world to the US to study, for them, then you would say, if you want to work for obviously the 4 years, because that's long term, but if you want to work, then you should obviously do that through your university, and they should have resources to assist you with that for others who come into the US.
And it pretty much has to be through the university. You're not necessarily going to have any other options but a university sponsored employment. So you will be working at the library, you will be working at the rec center. You won't have the option to say, oh, there's this really cool high paying internship that I could apply to from a company just around the corner. If the university is not writing your paycheck, you're probably going to be out of compliance with your visa. Again, that starts to get out of my professional scope, but the visa office at your university should be able to clarify where you can and can't work.
Interesting. So that's something, because we had a lot of questions about, hey, I'm an international student. How do I, keep up with my finances in US? How do I make enough money to sustain myself? So that's something to keep in mind. Sure, it's great to come to school in the United States, but it's just that ability for you to manage the income stream might be a little bit tricky.
Yeah. And the other thing I would add too is that you definitely want to talk to your family about what are options if finances change. Something that folks don't always realize, one of two things can happen in the world of financial aid. Some universities, if you tell them, I don't need any financial aid, but then 2 years down the road, something catastrophic happens in your family and that changes, you may not be able to ask for financial aid after the fact as an international student. Other times, what I've seen happen is that folks were willing to take out a loan, but there are a lot of lending agencies that will not lend to first or second year international students and will only open their services to juniors and seniors. So that's another thing that I've seen happen is folks kind of said, well, I'll figure it out as I'm studying, and then went to apply for a loan their sophomore year and had no options because they were a sophomore.
Interesting. And because what you mentioned earlier was actually very, very interesting to me. So you mentioned that when, say international students come in, if they don't come in with that financial aid, like you said, those conversations with their parents, if they come in without financial aid, then it would be very hard to get it, let's say their second or the third or the fourth year, right? So then for US students, because I think I saw a question about this earlier over the course of the workshop, but for US students, if they say, hey, for whatever reason, let me just go, no financial aid while I'm just trying to get into college. And for my second and my third or fourth year, let me try and apply and see what I can do in terms of whether or not I could potentially qualify. Would you say that that is a possibility, not necessarily whether it would be the best bet, or how would you say that the student should view the prospect of going in as no financial need, but trying to maneuver through the college finances in those latter years?
Yeah, so it's definitely a possibility that you could decide up front as a domestic student, I don't think I need financial aid now, but maybe I'll decide to change my mind later. It is an option. I think where folks kind of run the risk is depending on how severe finances can change or depending on how high that need for finances ends up being, it's can my university meet me where I'm at, or do I now have to leave my university because of what's happened and that I can no longer afford to be here financially? That does happen. A lot of universities, they try to work with students and their families, but it kind of just depends. So for example, I know that at Duke, there's almost like a window within the school year where if you had a change in family financial circumstance, it can't be taken into account for the current school year. It has to be applied for financial aid for the next year. So that again is kind of what I mean by, there are certain instances where that strategy of just, I don't need financial aid right now, but I might later, what's that do for me? Again, that can be kind of tough. So again, if you've got questions on financial aid policies that the universities you're considering, talk to the financial aid offices. Most universities, they do allow appeals, and they do allow folks to say, hey, we've had this circumstance occur, or even you can appeal the financial aid offer you get a first time around, because maybe there is something going on behind the scenes that you feel like wasn't captured in the FAFSA or the CSS profile, the Common Scholarship Search, which is another common financial aid document, especially for private universities in the United States. But again, it's hard to know financial aid policies. A lot of schools operate differently, but I would just say try to reach out, try to read the policies on the websites where you can, because you do run that mix where things have changed and you haven't necessarily made a plan with your family. What are we going to do in scenario B or scenario C? And we never want to think about those worst case scenarios, but when it comes to college finances and we're dealing with high price tags, those are going to be some things we have to talk about, because if things change financially, will we have an opportunity to use loans? How's our credit? Are we even, do we even have loans available to us? Those are going to be things that you want to run through, because those instances come with a lot of stress. And the more things that ahead of time, you can start to hopefully mitigate some of that stress, just because, okay, now we're panicking and we don't know who to reach out to and we don't know what our options are. So again, it's a pretty abstract conversation to have, and it's going to have a lot of moving parts, but I think it's definitely worth a conversation, because you never know.
Interesting. Because like going back to what you said at the very beginning, you don't know what you don't know, right? So maybe like before our folks try to embark on that adventure of a strategy, maybe like you said, just have that conversation with parents or whoever's might be financially responsible for whatever may happen, or going into college and footing that bill. So very interesting. So, and I think a lot of students can take away from that. But one final thing as we wrap up tonight, and when somebody submitted this question 2 weeks ago, I was like, this got to be the perfect one to end on. So from your experience working with so many students, what is one thing, just one thing in particular, and please feel free to expand on it, that about personal finance, not just in college, but like in life in general, that you wish every college student you worked with at Duke knew before they came into your office?
That is a really good question. I think the one thing that I would just encourage everybody to walk away with is, regardless of your situation, things can turn on a dime, and you may need to be your own security net and your own foundation down the road. And so I would say, do what you can to create as much financial independence as early as possible. Life changes all the time. I've had students who have said, hey, I'm coming out to my family and I'm not sure if they're going to accept me or cut me out. And if that's the case, what do I do financially to prepare? I've had folks suddenly lose a parent. I've had folks in a country where all of the sudden war breaks out. So I think that to rely on, well, this is my situation right now and things are pretty good. I think we're just putting a lot of stock into nothing bad happening and all things staying the same. Your life is going to change. And it's not just bad things that will happen. It's good things and great opportunities. But if we are not building that financial independence and security for ourselves, there are things that we'll have to say no to. There's things that we just won't be able to do because our financial dependence was built on somebody else or some other system. So that's what I would really encourage folks to do, is start asking yourself, what are the things that I need to do to be financially independent? What are the things that I need to start taking control over myself? Where should I get a little bit more responsibility? And it can start as small as saying, hey, parent, do I have my own bank account? Parent, do I have my own debit card? Parent, do I have my own savings account? For students on the call doing the financial aid processes, parent, I want to sit down with you and I want to go over this, even if it's boring, even if it's confusing, even if I have no idea what this legal jargon application is saying. Don't just let folks make decisions for you, and don't let just folks allow you to sit in the back seat. There's going to be so many great opportunities, especially that this generation, I think, will have in front of them. So I would say just do what you can to empower yourself financially. It starts with the education, but it also starts with you taking that step forward, getting involved with things like Flip, like YEI, that just exposes you to this area of thinking about money. Now you started the conversation with yourself, and that's the first step. You're not going to move forward by just standing still and letting other folks make the decisions for you. So keep learning, keep saving. But again, just kind of turn that goal to financial independence and freedom, because I think if that's your focus, you're going to take the steps to learn, well, what do I need to do that? What does that look like for me? And I think that's where the personal finance journey really begins.
Wow. Start that conversation first. I think that's wonderful. And I think that's probably the most important thing that, people need to take away is, start asking questions. Like you said, start figuring out, what can I do? How can I become independent? Wow. Very nice. Very nice. So thank you very much, Anna, for all the time and the effort you put into tonight and coming here to answer our questions. I can speak on, behalf of myself, the Flip team, the YEI, and all of the folks that are watching the live stream right now. I can tell you we are very, very much grateful for your being here. And, it was great to hear from your perspective, especially coming from somebody who's worked, for such a long time in the, in the financial literacy aspect. So we are very, 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 very grateful for your being here. And now for those folks that are watching, I'm just going to run through a bit of a quick, just to wrap up, with respect to what are some next steps you can take and how we at Flip and the YEI can help you move forward in the right direction. So let me go ahead and return back to my handy dandy little slideshow. And so in terms of closing remarks, I just want to remind folks, if you are interested or if you think that, hey, something that they did today in this workshop resonated with me, or you just want to come along with us for the ride, you get to meet such amazing people like Anna, here through our network. And it's just a great opportunity, like she said, to find your ground, start that exploration of, hey, how does financial literacy and what does financial literacy mean to me and in my story? So we would love to have you all embark on the journey. If you all want, please do feel free to visit our website. The website is theyei.org. We're looking for people to join our international Flip team right now. So we'd love to have you. And if you just want to learn about economics in general, talk to your school, high school, talk to your administration, see if you have some people who want to start a YEI chapter at your school. And maybe we can push out our curriculum through Flip to help you all bring what Anna and I shared with you all today into your classrooms, into your local communities. And really, I can speak for Anna and myself. We'd love to see that happen. So, thank you all very much for coming to today's workshop. It was certainly a pleasure having you all submit those live questions. And thank you for those of you who submitted the questions beforehand. Hopefully, we got to somewhere, some sort of part in the wheelhouse that you all were curious about. If not, we will try to have more of these workshops in the future. And please feel free to come back and return, and we'd love to have you. But in the meantime, thank you all so very much for coming. Take care, and to everyone, a good night.